Hey everyone, welcome to the Color by Felix podcast. We are excited to be back here talking about art with Sophie Sturdevant. I hope I pronounced that last name right. Thank you for being with us here today, Sophie.
Yeah, you guys, thank you so much for having me. I know that this has kind of been in talks for a little while, but I'm so honored to be here and can't wait to dive in.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you joining us. It was kind of a last minute save. So really appreciate you being here. So you guys want to just start off by kind of explaining your history? I know Felix and Sophie, you know each other.
Yeah, so we were introduced through modeling. She worked at an agency, right? And that's how we met. And we both kind of connected through art. So I started following you on Instagram and then seeing your work. You didn't post during that time. You didn't post as much art, but
Right.
I think after you left the agency, you started posting more, and then you started doing like digital, like a mixed media type work, which was really cool. And that's why we were really excited to have you on, especially
Me
Andrea.
especially. I'm like so excited
Oh.
to talk to you.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, because those of you who don't know, who maybe haven't listened to the first episode, Felix used to be professionally hot. So before he was a professional painter.
Used to be.
Yeah, I'm just an old fart.
Join the club. You know, that's what happens.
That's awesome. So you guys met at the agency, you started following Sophie, and then since then, Sophie, you've gotten into some pretty interesting stuff with digital art, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to hear your journey. Tell us about it.
Oh my gosh. You know, it's funny because every time I start my story, I have to sort of annotate the conversation with like I am not technologically savvy. So even prior to this, I'm trying to hook up my headphones and my boyfriend, I'm just like, oh my God, the AirPod, like I can't get the Bluetooth to work or whatever. So it's funny to me that I have found myself in a pretty heavy technological side of art right now, which is kind of the concept of NFTs and Web3. And it feels very much like I've caught almost an alternative reality, sort of like parallel reality loop, because it's so strange. And it really is, I'll be honest, like different from my lean as a person. In general, I'm very analog. I still get the newspaper on Saturdays and I love books, and I am in my heart a traditional artist. And so it's funny because a lot of people I think that have been attracted to NFTs and to crypto art and Web3 have really found, I think, the technology especially intriguing or inspiring. And for me, it was just an avenue of distribution for the art that I was already making. So I started creating digitally when I sort of entered the space of NFTs, because the transition from, you know, traditional to I guess minting or publishing work on the blockchain was a lot more difficult than just creating something digitally and then, you know, airdropping it or emailing it to myself, as opposed to finding a scanner and making sure that all of the colors and the vibrancy was indicative or representative of that traditional piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to start with that in terms of my background is traditional. I love paper. I go to museums and I am so obsessed with how curators frame everything. I love physical presentation. And so it's funny for me to be in NFTs. It's a little bit ironic, but here I am. And yeah, it's been a blast. It's been wild.
That's cool. And I'm like really interested to hear like your background about art. Like, how did you, cause like Felix would like kind of, I never really met you personally, but I remember Felix would be like, oh yeah, this is Sophie. Like sometimes your posts would like come up on his feed or something and he'd be like, oh, look, Sophie's doing like such cool art. And or like, I remember at one point you were doing like poetry and like, that was kind of when he just met you at the agency. And so that's where I left off, I guess, where you guys met. So how did you go from like being at the agency and then doing art full time? Like how did you transition there and what was that like?
Yeah, great question. I think that time in my life speaks to the path that I would consider I was supposed to go down, you know, from like a really traditional, I guess, corporate sense. So At the age of 5, I told everyone that I wanted to be an artist. It was always like, that was my dream. My mother is an artist, and I have, ancestral ties to art, and I'm not musical at all, but there are musicians in my family. There's just a lot of creativity, I think, that I grew up sort of seeing and engaging with. And then, I got into high school, ended up going to the University of Washington in Seattle. I was very much committed to like okay, I can't be an artist because I don't want to starve. So let me go, do something that is corporate. I wanted to be, a boss in the corporate world, maybe an editor or some big time marketer or something, because I had that lean also. So I ended up sort of letting the dream of being an artist, I'll say, like, I don't want to say die, but like lie dormant for a significant portion of my adolescence and early 20s, even, just in the name of wanting to do the right thing from, like I said, a traditional sense. And so I had committed to that path, and I was like, okay, you know what, if I can't be an artist because that doesn't line up with, family values or what society expects out of me, because I'm a good girl and I want to do the right thing, it was very much like I slotted myself into that box of needing to go down that path, when in reality, and this sort of came about in like my early to mid 20s when I was at the agency, I was sort of drawing in like those quiet, really sacred spaces, but not necessarily sharing anything, not talking about my work, because it was really at the time being used for like my own personal therapy after coming out of an eating disorder and an abusive relationship. It was very much a personal experience to me, not necessarily for the purpose of sharing, but once I started to share, I found like such beautiful relationships and interactions coming out of that. And a couple of my friends would buy a piece or something, and at the time they were very abstract, figurative works, lots of line art, nothing super complex or robust or anything. But I was getting feedback that was essentially like, the way that you express the woman's form makes me feel better in my own body, and things like that. And so I felt like what I was doing for myself through art, I was seeing a transfer of that when it came to my collectors and my clients, the people that were purchasing work from me. And so for the first time, I felt like, oh my gosh, there is something here that is really significant. And I think the way that we can create and define stories as an artist is imperative for, evolution as a human society. And so I think that the way that we do that is really important. So when I was at the agency, it was like, okay, I'm doing the right thing because I'm doing marketing and I'm helping facilitate and I'm a great communicator. That's what I went to school for. And I came out and I had a couple jobs after that, just in digital marketing and social media and that sort of thing, content creation. But I'm supposed to be an artist. And so in the last couple of years, I've kind of committed to that vision, and thank goodness for NFTs. They've allowed for my financial sustainability to, I think, be much more accessible at a younger age than I expected. And so, yeah, it's been kind of a wild journey, but definitely it took a few leaps of commitment to self and a true convicted commitment to my own personal story as an artist, and to give that a lot of weight and value, to make that leap from good corporate girl doing the right thing in America to, oh, my, dad doesn't know that I've done this, but I'm a full-time artist. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And
that's what I was going to ask. So you do this full time right now, and you moved from Seattle, right?
So I'm in Chicago now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're okay, because I saw you like go to California and do something there, and I wasn't sure if you're in Chicago or California, but that's awesome. So you do this full time, and we'd like to know how you got into NFTs. How did you find somebody, or like you just were interested in, or it accidentally happened, or if you don't mind sharing that'd be interesting.
Yeah. No, great question. It's kind of a little bit of everything. It feels a little bit accidental. I had sort of, I guess, the right voices speaking into my life at the time. So it was kind of mixed. I had essentially, I got into NFTs in December of 2020. So it was before sort of the craze of last year, in which, it was kind of taking off from a media standpoint, February, March of 2021. So I caught it a little bit before that. I was interested because I had heard that at the time, NFTs weren't even called NFTs, non-fungible tokens. It was just crypto art at the time. So it was art that lived on a technology called the blockchain that allowed artists to receive royalties forever after, you know, continued sales of a work, and established provenance, which essentially means, and I can get into some of the technicalities if I don't want to bore anybody or, you know, bore the audience or anything. But
no, it's interesting. Share
okay.
everything.
Okay, great. So I was intrigued by NFTs because of two things specifically. First of them being provenance, in terms of as an artist early in my career, wanting to make the leap into like part-time or full-time artistry. At the time, this was like late 2020. I was looking for avenues and looking for, I think I was just intaking a bunch of different business models to figure out what direction do I want to go. Do I want to lead really heavily into like the, I am a poet, I am an artist, I am this, you know, hippie creative sort of lane? Do I want to lean into like an Uber Instagram focus, like content strategy type of lane? Because there are a million ways to skin a cat, so there are a million ways to be an artist, right? And I was kind of observing and learning from even somebody like Felix, who has been annihilating Instagram for years. You know what I mean? Like there have been so many, I think, models of ways to be aspirational as an artist to me. And at the time I was sort of finding what my niche was, or what my path would be. And this was like at the time when Clubhouse was kind of heavy. We were still like super middle pandemic. You know, I had moved to Chicago, so I was new. I had no friends, and I was on Clubhouse till 2 a.m. every night, just like hearing human voices for the first time in so long, and started hopping into.
Why Clubhouse?
I think at the time I was really looking for human connection in a way that I didn't have it. You know, I was new to the city, so I didn't have a group of, you know, core friends or even family. I left all of my family in Seattle, seeking specifically creative community because I knew I wanted to find creatives out of sort of the Midwest, which is kind of like an underground hustler type of energy. And I wanted that for my own artistry, and I wanted to create friends in that type of community.
So you already knew that. Sorry, I keep asking you questions. There's so many questions.
Yeah, no, this is great. This is great.
So you already knew that like you wanted to go to Chicago, like that people there were like creative and you wanted to be a part of that community. And that's what took you to Chicago.
Yes. So I was at the point in my life where I was deciding I wanted to immerse myself in creative community. I didn't see myself establishing roots in Seattle necessarily. I'd grown up in Denver, so I didn't feel huge ties to the city of Seattle as much as I loved it. And so because of that, I was thinking, you know, as an artist, do I go to LA? Do I do New York? What's the move here? Neither of them necessarily felt right in my spirit. But I had a couple friends or a couple acquaintances that were in Chicago that spoke really highly of the creative community here, especially when it comes to music. And so it was kind of the happy medium between LA and New York as hubs for artistry and creativity, with kind of an edge. And I wanted a little bit of that grind that wasn't so coastal, I think, when it came to like my creativity and the creative community that I was immersed in. So I decided on Chicago. I moved here, and then it was about 6 months that I was here that I was spending a bunch of time on Clubhouse, just trying to make friends and just finding, you know, people, even if they weren't in Chicago, but other creatives or artists that were looking to just connect and share, you know, marketing strategies or style tips or whatever. And that's kind of how I stumbled or like fell into a couple of rooms about crypto art at the time, which is what we were calling it as opposed to NFTs. And I was intrigued specifically by the ability to establish your provenance. So as like an up and coming artist, or as an artist that hadn't necessarily built a name or any type of established collectorship yet, I liked the idea that somebody could buy into what it was that I was doing, and support my artistry really early, and say I was part of like the Sophie train early on in her career in like 2020, before anybody knew her name, before, you know, she had over 1,000 followers on Instagram or whatever. I loved that I could bring people in early, and that they had like a certificate of authenticity early on that said I was part of that before it was anything big. And so that took a lot of, I think, really terrifying commitment to self and commitment to my vision to say, you know what, I actually believe that I have something to share with the world artistically. And so early on, like, here, I'm going to bring you in, I'm going to give you the opportunity to support me and really be part of this before there's any reason to believe in me necessarily. So that's, I think the first thing that intrigued me was the provenance, just the timestamp that is, I mint this on the blockchain. It's here forever. Nobody can get rid of it. And then secondly, royalties. I think that I have seen time and time again, I mean, you hear about Van Gogh having sold one painting in his entire life. And, now who knows how many hands have that those pieces have passed through, right? But his family, his estate isn't necessarily entitled to all of that, the money that his paintings are being sold for now. On the blockchain, I can essentially say, if I set a royalties percentage, for example, to 10 or 20% every time a piece is sold on the secondary market, which means after the initial collector, I get paid out 20% of that sale. So even if that means that like my children or my children's children are affected financially when it comes to generational wealth, that's something that has been so beautiful, is that I get to partake in, sort of an accelerated career, but also like it doesn't just end at, the time of my death. Like that's something that can live on forever.
That's super cool.
Wow, I didn't even think that far ahead. That's pretty good. I mean, that's interesting. I never actually heard that before. Where you can take do the percentage after you sold it, and if somebody sells it again. I didn't even think about. I never heard of that. So that's pretty cool. Interesting.
Yeah, well, the art world is full of stories of people who get in early because they see potential with an artist. They buy a bunch of that artist's art and then they essentially flip it.
Yep.
Like you'd flip a home, only the artist is completely cut out of that deal.
Exactly.
So I feel like it's yet another way to empower artists.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's exceptionally empowering. A lot of, I think, negative feedback I see online is like NFTs are hurting artists, and I stand back and I can't help but think, but myself and all of my friends we're okay because of them, at least to an extent. We can sell prints, can sell originals and t-shirts all day long. But there is value to even the royalty factor, especially because it does mean that the second collector, if they sell it for double, I get a cut of that. I mean, that's my work. That's my heart and soul in every single piece. For the second person to buy it after that first purchase, and for me to not see any of that support monetarily, can be a little bit frustrating or discouraging to an artist in the traditional space.
Yeah, I feel like technology in general, like it's been this weird thing that I personally didn't see coming, where it's like, now there's more power being given to the artists and taken away from the man kind of. And you see it, music hasn't really figured it out yet. We're still trying, but like in the music world, it's still like 100% these deals where basically the record label kind of deals with Spotify or whatever the streamer is, and they pocket all the money and then the artist gets pennies, and so it's like a struggle between the people and the man, but like it seems like with visual art, at least, this is a really cool way to give the power where it should be, because it's like you're the one doing the work. If there's money being made, why is it not going?
Why not the creator?
Hands? Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, you look at, a social media platform like Instagram or something. Instagram is making so much money off of the back of creators, right?
Yeah.
But the creators, more often than not, don't see any of that revenue, even though the creators are the ones that are actually creating that content.
Right. We're the ones keeping their eyeballs on the app, and that's how they get paid, is how much time people spend on their app.
Right. Well, so the better content you're putting out means that you should be compensated for that as the artist.
Well, now it's like they're realizing that. I think they know that like creators are starting to wake up to that, because everyone's just going to YouTube now, because that's the only platform that actually pays you well. But like recently, like Facebook started monetizing, Instagram started monetizing, TikTok monetizes, but it's barely anything. So I think in the future, like if they want to compete with each other, which they do, they have to start paying people like livable wages, like not even livable, but like good wages if they want to keep top creators,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they say, I hope I don't screw up this quote, but they essentially say, if you're not paying for the product, you have to assume that you are the product. So on Instagram, if you're using a free service, you have to assume that you are the product in that sense. So somebody is making money off of you, which is fine to an extent if you're okay with that. But as somebody who is an artist and my livelihood is the creation of assets, right? Like I need to be paid in order to continue to make work at scale, you know, otherwise
So
the art stops.
talking about that, I guess I have like so many questions about like NFTs and all this stuff. Like you hear so much about it online, especially like negative stuff. So like I would love to just ask you about some of these things that like people say and like hear what you have to say. Like, for example, someone's like, oh, what's the point of an NFT? Like I could literally just screenshot something and like, you know, so what would you say to something like that?
Yeah, it's no, absolutely. And it's funny because the NFT space will refer to that as like a right click save as type of guy, where it's just like, well, what does it matter if you own the piece, if I can literally right click save as to my desktop and then it's mine too, technically, right? It's kind of the same. I would compare it to what we're seeing in, I mean, even Web 2 right now, like my website, like somebody can go to my website and purchase a print through me, and then I send them a print and, you know, make a certain amount of profit because of that. Or they could literally just download that piece and print it off themselves and it costs them no money. So there is, I mean, there's not, I think that because of the novelty of Web3, it feels really like a little bit stupid maybe, or obscure to be like, if I could just screenshot it or save it, then it's mine. That's the same with prints in the traditional art space. What an NFT is I liken it to a certificate of authenticity or proof of ownership. So it's sort of
like we basically just shipped out an original piece, and with every piece that we send, like the fine art ones, we give a certificate of authentication, you know.
Yep,
so
exactly.
it's the same thing, I guess.
So even with that, I mean, you could say you send somebody a certificate of authentication. What if they burn it, or what if like it falls by the wayside or something, and they don't have that anymore? Like where can you find that? The blockchain is essentially that solve to say you cannot erase it, it cannot disappear. You can transfer it, you can exchange it, you can even burn it, but even doing so, it just gets sent to a different wallet address. So it always lives on.
What would happen, like, because I've also heard of like these guys that are like, oh, I bought like a million shares, or I don't know how much, but a million shares of Bitcoin when it was like $2, and then I lost my wallet key code or whatever. So like, can that same thing happen like with a certificate of authentication?
Oh my God, yes. Like I will say scams, I mean, just in general, we all saw this kind of with the COVID, like the rise of scams is insane. And that's absolutely reflected in the NFT space. People are being maliciously scammed every single day. So it requires an extreme and exceptional level of due diligence and patience, I think, so that you don't get caught up in like the FOMO of something and buy in or click something too quickly, or give somebody your information that shouldn't have your information, because that absolutely does happen. I want to say this too, in terms of like that certificate of ownership. The thing that I always liken it to help provide an example is sort of like the title of your home, right? Like even though you have the asset of the home, you can only sell it if you have the title, or you can only sell your car if you have the title of your car, right? It's that proof of ownership. And even when it comes to how that shows up in the traditional space, a few years ago, pre-COVID, you know, I don't know if you guys saw this, but the banana that was taped to the wall at Art Basel sold for like $120,000, right? And everybody was up in arms about it. But that's art, and that's the beauty and the tragedy of what it is to like be an artist, you know. But at the same time, like,
I think it was like 120 million, not 1,000 or something. It was like
that's a lot of money.
Was it million?
No, it's probably 120.
That's like Elon Musk money.
No,
maybe Elon Musk bought it.
At that point, you might as well just buy Twitter. I'm pretty sure. There may have been a couple editions of that piece, but the collector wasn't buying a banana taped to a wall at Art Basel. You can't remove the wall. You can't take home the banana. Even if you did, it would mold, you know, within a couple months. But the point of that was the proof of ownership, or the certificate of authenticity that says I owned that banana taped to the wall at Art Basel, even if he doesn't have that banana in his home on display in like the foyer.
And I'm going to say something kind of controversial here, but I want to hear your thoughts on it. Because I think that the banana illustration, like it actually kind of proves the point that a lot of our cultural ideas about ownership are kind of foolish at their core.
Yeah.
Like even like the idea that I can own land, right? Like I'm going to be dead one day. Do I own this land? Like if somebody strong enough comes and takes it from me, as they have all throughout history, it's now their land, you know? And they also don't own it because they'll also be dead one day. And so, like, not to be super grim, but like, I think that it just illustrates the point that, like in the end of the day, the idea of ownership itself is in a way kind of foolish. And like in maybe a utopian world, like we would just make art because it's good for our souls and because we want to share it with people and stuff like that. But I think that this idea of ownership and NFTs, I actually completely support it, because I feel like if the system is money, if we're going to say, hey, the world is about ownership, the world is about money, and we've seen throughout the centuries artists get exploited over and over and over again while other people are making money off their art, then I think it's like, hey, why not just accept that there is an absurd system in place, and if that absurd system allows me to eat, then I'm going to do what I need to do within that system to eat, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it is. I mean, we could go down a very different path that, you know, sort of speaks to my ethos of what it is to be an artist and have creative responsibility, because a lot of it is so far past the point of what NFTs are. I mean, that's such a, I think, such a small, like, niche part of my career when it comes to how I actually value artistry and tangible experiences and that sort of thing. But I mean, they say that, so I keep referring to something called Web3, which is essentially the new age of the internet that we're moving into right now.
I was going to ask you about that. Can you explain Web3?
Sure. Yeah. So early, like in the 90s, right, the first iteration of the internet was called Web 1. And so they say that Web 1 was predominantly reading. There was not necessarily a ton of two-way interaction. You could maybe, if you had a personal computer, log on to the internet and read or consume or just receive whatever information was being disseminated at that time. Web 2 came about when they're allowed for some kind of interaction or interoperability in terms of, like, now I not only am I reading, but I can also write. So I can write blogs, I can share a post on Twitter or Instagram or something like that. So there was a little bit more of two-way communication in Web 2. So we go from reading to writing, and now Web 3, the concept is ownership. So yes, there is a bit of an absurdity, I think, when it comes to owning creativity, but we've seen sort of that emphasis. You know, how far can we go back and talk about, like, ownership over art and creativity? And is it right? I don't know. Is it pointing us to a greater utopia? I don't know, but I do believe that if there is a healthy way in which we're interacting with ownership and provenance, I think that it could be for the better. I'll also say too that I have works minted that are not listed for sale. So somebody can't come by and own them. I just have them on my page, or I have them minted to say, I made this, you know, let it be known that on this day, you know, in 2022, Sophie Sturdevant minted this NFT just for provenance, to say, like, I was here at this time, this is part of my legacy, but it's not for sale. So people can come and look at it or bid on it or whatever, but I've not made it available for purchase.
That's cool.
It's pretty,
and I just
it's just for me.
I just want to emphasize also that I'm not at all criticizing your choices. What I was essentially saying is, like, if other people are going to put ownership on art and make money off of it, why shouldn't artists get in on that action? You know, if they're the ones actually doing the work, like.
Yeah. And that's a great point too. I mean, I, like, personally, even I am very critical of the space. I feel like I have to be, if I'm going to be a good participant of the ecosystem. I don't just want to come in and drink the Kool-Aid and say, oh, all of this is fine and dandy, because there are issues. Are there issues in the traditional space? Of course. I mean, humans, we're just made up of a bunch of issues, right? So we see that happen in every industry, in every lane. But you're right, exactly, Sebastian. If there's a way that, you know, if ownership over art and creativity is kind of a big deal, as the artist, like, I want to see artists win in that, you know what I mean? And if NFTs are a way for artists to come up and find some financial stability, or to be able to send money home, you know, or buy their parents a house, or pay off student loan debt or something like that, that's what I want to see out of NFTs. And NFTs are allowing artists to do that for sure every day.
Since we're talking about this subject, also I have a question about like I don't know really much about how this works, but I've heard a lot of people talking about like gas and like how it costs energy, and like can you explain the whole process of like minting and like what they mean when they say like it's having a poor environmental impact, blah blah blah, like, and what do you think about that?
Yeah, totally. So right now, when I say blockchain, there's the Bitcoin blockchain. So Bitcoin lives on the Bitcoin blockchain. Ethereum lives on the Ethereum blockchain. There are other blockchains. We have Polygon, we have Solana, we have Tezos. So blockchain isn't just one highway. There are multiple kind of highways that are made up of this type of technology. The Ethereum blockchain is typically what people are talking about when they talk about the environmental impact. So right now, to mine Ethereum is environmentally hurtful, and it can be damaging just because of the amount of computer power that it takes to actually mine Ethereum from a computer. And same with Bitcoin. So there's a lot of speculation as to whether or not this is sustainable. So a lot of the space cares about this a lot, which is why you see projects and collections and creators and collectors moving to environmentally friendly or gas-free blockchains such as Polygon, or cheaper blockchains such as Tezos or something. So there is a lot, I think, that the space is doing to move toward a more efficient, more eco-friendly type of blockchain. Right now, Ethereum was the first blockchain that allowed for tokens to be minted assigned to works of art, for example. You couldn't do that on the Bitcoin blockchain. It was just the token in and of itself. Ethereum changed that and made it a little bit more interactive and interoperable in that way. And now we're moving to even like a more efficient ecosystem, hopefully with ETH 2.0, maybe in the next couple of years. I've heard different things about ETH 2.0, but then also Polygon or Tezos or Solana, something like that allows people to avoid those crazy, ridiculous gas fees that have priced out a lot of newcomers to the space, and help to alleviate some of those environmental issues too.
So is that saying like when you mine for that stuff, is that literally like you have your computer running and your computer performs a certain action that generates Bitcoin or something?
Yeah, totally. So there are Bitcoin and Ethereum miners that have these like massive superpower computers. I don't know all of the details as to how it actually works, but there are.
And where are
miners.
they? Are they just like some Russian hackers or something?
I've heard it was Kazakhstan had a ton of places like warehouses devoted to that.
Yes, they have like warehouses dedicated to it. They have like little factories and stuff around the world. Anybody can essentially be a miner. So I had my dad, he's like a #1 con man. He's always looking for ways to make money. He's in NFTs and stuff, trying to flip and everything.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Did you teach him?
I did, yeah. So Sean and I kind of got my parents into NFTs, my mom from an artist perspective and my dad from an investor perspective. But at one point he was like, what do we do to get one of those computers? I'm trying to mine some Ethereum. So anybody can do it if you have the right equipment. I'm not necessarily interested because that's not my lane, but.
Cool.
Dude,
yeah, it seems so weird. It seems like you're given the opportunity to have this digital thing and yet they want to make it physical. It's like, can't you just, I don't know.
I think, you know what, I will say too, I think even in that we have not tapped into, I think, an optimized type of utility or experience that is NFTs living, only in a digital space and transcending into the physical space. So a lot of what NFTs provide is access to something physical or VIP membership to something physical or whatever. So for example, I was part of, I don't know if you guys have heard of this brand called The Hundreds, but they're this incredible streetwear brand. They've been around, a legacy brand. They've been around for about 18 years, led by two guys named Ben and Bobby Hundreds, who are incredible people. But I was one of the artists on their NFT project called the Atom Bomb Squad NFT project, and it was 25,000 iterations of their bombs on the blockchain. And part of being a collector or an owner of one of those little bombs means that you get exclusive or first access to drops on their website. So what they've done is allow people to participate in early access things to, streetwear drop, like highly anticipated collaborative streetwear drops, or you know, we've gotten into parties in LA or special events or whatever that they're hosting just because we are holding one of those bombs in our wallet. So I think that where we'll see maximum or optimized beauty when it comes to NFTs is that transition, or is that, I think, play between digital and physical spaces. We still live in physical spaces. Like, I'm still wearing a t-shirt regardless of, you know, how many people try and sell me like virtual wearables, right? Like, I'm still going to be wearing this t-shirt on my body, you know. So
isn't that crazy to think about though? Like, what if we get to a point where like you can't even tell like what's real and what's not?
I think we're inching more and more closely there every day.
Isn't
and
that
I'm terrified.
creepy?
It's so creepy. And that's like sort of the side of it that I think I am terrified of.
Yeah, me too. What?
Yeah.
It's like inevitable. But like the thing that
Yeah.
tipped me off to that was like, you look at certain creators on TikTok or Reels or whatever, and these people have really good video editing techniques. And so you almost never see the real them because they're always in front of some kind of green screen, or they've modified their appearance in some way. And so it made me realize, even if you're just doing a lot of crazy makeup, like there's somebody I follow who always looks like some version of David Bowie, some kind of space alien all glammed up, you know? And it's like, even then you have regulation over the image you put forth of yourself, you know, like most people don't know you as your human self.
That's
know?
crazy.
And so it's like, if you think about that, we're already kind of mentally conditioned to live in these artificial spaces, you know?
Wow.
We are, and to really, I think, curate our digital identities, which, I mean, when it comes to the morality of that, right, there are 1.5 million conversations that you can have just regarding how do I show up online that's really representative of who I am in person. I am personally convicted by that, and I want the way that I show up online to be very representative of how I am in person. So I'll usually have like my face as my profile photo, and I use my name everywhere. I'm not trying to show up online anonymous. There are a lot of people that are doing that because that's kind of part of the, I think, the ability or the freedom to curate however you want to show up online. I don't know necessarily what that means for us in the future, but I think as somebody who is really invested in physical, tangible experiences and spaces as a traditional artist, I want people to see me in person and to be like, oh my God, Sophie, I know you from Twitter. And that happens, you know, all the time, and it's beautiful. And I love that. I don't want to be anonymous, but that's also that's just a personal decision depending on how somebody might want to interact or represent themselves in a way that they can't necessarily on land.
Right.
So explain to, like, let's say someone is just like getting into, or like is into the NFTs and stuff, like how does the process work? Because I remember me and Andre, when it like about a year ago, we kind of heard about it and we're like, let's just try it for fun. And we just kind of looked into it, and you had to pay like $100 to post your image. I don't know if that was a scam or not. And we
it wasn't a
so
scam.
I don't know, I don't know. We tried it.
But it's expensive,
it was
right?
expensive to just share your arts, and we posted a couple of them and we didn't get no traction or anything. So explain, like, why do you know why that is that, do you need to have certain connections, or is there, like, you know how Instagram has hashtags to get your art like specifically to the right audience? Is there a certain like thing you have to do to make it like visible?
And maybe you could just kind of like explain also your, like, while answering that, explain like your story, how you got started, you know, to share with people wanting to get started. Yeah,
absolutely. So a couple points that I kind of want to hit on here in this conversation. Firstly, Ethereum, one of the, I think, controversial points around Ethereum is that it has priced a lot of people out because of gas fees. If you are coming to mint a work, for example, it might cost you, depending on what is happening on the blockchain that day, $100. You know what I mean? If there's something called the gas war going on, I mean, those gas fees might get up into the thousands, and it's ridiculous. And a lot of people are priced out. When I started, the price of Ethereum was a lot less than it is today. I think today we're sitting at about $3,000. But when I got in, I think Ethereum, the most it had hit was 800, and it was about 500. So for me, gas fees were like $16 to mint at about the time. I remember I minted a work for $24, and I thought that was so expensive. You know, this was in like 2020 or something, and I was just like, this is unsustainable. And so I think now that a lot of artists have kind of found themselves lacking the ability to mint their first piece because it is so expensive, have moved on to more accessible blockchains like Polygon or Tezos that do, I mean, gas fees might be $3, you know what I mean, $5 on a day if it's a more expensive day. So there are different ways, I think, to show up in a way that like does suit where you are in terms of like your financial stability, your commitment to your career, and even like what you want out of it. Because like in some instances, I have artist friends that are super experimental and really explorative with their creativity, and they're like, I don't know that this piece will sell or that this piece will sell for a lot, so I'm not necessarily interested in putting $100 in gas fees to mint this work. And then I have other, you know, other friends or other instances in which it's like, no, I'm sure that this is going to sell for a lot of money. I know that I'm going to get my return on that investment that I've paid out in my gas fee. So the $100 or the, you know, $50 or whatever is acceptable to me. I will also say that a lot of platforms, even on Ethereum, have migrated to gasless minting. So if you are on Rarible or OpenSea, for example, you can mint one of those works and the collector upon purchase pays the gas fees. So the artist does not pay those upfront, which is something that more platforms have moved toward over the last couple of years because they understand the value of giving artists or empowering artists to mint more frequently or whatever, because obviously they end up making more money the more works are being minted and sold on those platforms. Mm-hmm. And then to even speak to your point about how I did it, I think, you know, something that I found really effective at the very beginning of my entrance into NFTs was to write about my experiences. I gained a lot of traction writing Medium articles on how to navigate NFTs as a traditional artist. When I was starting, I was really looking for, I think, marketing tips and pricing strategies and all this stuff that, like, you know, you Google pricing strategies for artists online, and it's just, I'm so sorry for anybody that does that after this, because it's a mess. But I found that all of the information I was seeking was not readily available to me. And if it was, it had nothing to do with NFTs. And the market is so different than it is in the traditional space, at least right now. And so I started writing about that. I was putting out, you know, tweet threads that were like, if you're a traditional artist, here's how to mint your first piece, you know, or here's how to, you know, digitize your work in a way that's effective for, you know, minting and selling on Rarible or whatever. So I was providing a lot of resources to other artists. I was kind of gaining some collector eyes doing that sort of thing and driving a lot of people to check out my work based on the traffic I was getting from those articles and resources I was providing around sustainability, longevity, even technical application of the tools. I think there was a lot of confusion around how to actually mint something. So I have like a, you know, how to mint A to Z and then how to cash out your money A to Z in an article, because a lot of people were like, that sounds great. Thanks for, you know, telling me to get into NFTs, but I have no idea where to start.
I want to really quickly highlight this before you move on, because I think this is so useful to Felix's audience, is that if you are looking for a way to get some attention, provide some value to people, because I think that, like, I've recently had an experience in my own life with this, talking about clothes. Like, if you make your content completely centered on what other people can get from it, that's a great way to ensure that a lot of people are going to want to follow your journey. And I think that, like, it's so clear with your example. And it's like, and you didn't wait till you were a master of NFTs. Like you said, you weren't even like technologically savvy. You were just kind of taking people along on your journey as you learned. And like, I think that's such a huge opportunity for people. If they're
thank you for that. I think that's such a brilliant point too, because, and I haven't written an article, I think maybe since January or December. So that's not necessarily my focus anymore. My focus now is the art, but it absolutely helped for me to gain a community, really get to know people online that were super supportive of me up front. I mean, I can't tell you how many times people have reached out that are like, hey, I don't really care about your art, but thanks for the article. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, you know, come back later if something, you know, hits you or whatever. But I've been so excited, I think, to connect with such a wide and diverse audience of people based on the value, like you said, that I was providing. And I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, most of my articles start with, I have no idea what I'm doing, but here's what I learned today, or here is what I understand based on experience. I hope this helps you to reach out to me on Twitter if you have any questions. So that's kind of where I started to gain a little bit of that traction. And I think with any artist, you know, and this is something I tell people in NFTs and otherwise, like, especially today, you look at brands that are doing really well and they like really emphasize sustainability, or they have a really, really strong brand story. There's something about their brand that their ideal, customer base is really drawn to. And the same as for an artist, like, people are as invested or as interested in the artist as they are the art. So the more you're able to tell your story and the more you're able to provide value and context for who you are as a person, I think the more likely people are to actually see your work for what it is and what you mean, especially while you are, refining your skill set and defining your style. And I know that can take a long time. So especially at the beginning, I think it's important and imperative for artists that are looking to come up or make a name for themselves or gain a little bit of traction is just to start telling their artistic story and providing value, whether that's here's my journey, or here are some obstacles that I found, or here are some great resources that I found on YouTube today. There are 1.5 million ways. I keep saying that. I don't know why I keep saying that, but there are a bunch of ways to connect with an audience, and sharing work should be your priority if you want to be an artist. But then secondly, like don't forget about sharing your own personal story, because that's really, really important.
And I think you made a great point. It's like, you don't have to pick. Sorry, I'm done after this. I just think that Felix is a great example too. Like, Felix is not at the end of the day, like, here just to teach, he wants to ultimately share work, but the teaching is a great vehicle to, give people a lot of people what they love, and then also be like, hey, while you're here, check out my work. It's like, you don't
Absolutely
have to be one or the other.
And and that's what's cool is sometimes people find me, and probably for Felix too, like, people find me through the art and then ended up stumbling into my articles, and then they share it with friends or whatever. And a lot of people have found me through those articles, or have found my art through those articles. So it's kind of like I want to attack this from with a multi-pronged approach. That's like, however you're finding me, I'm going to like shuffle you into the ecosystem that is the rest of me, because there's so much to offer here.
Wow.
Thank you.
That's
really good. So from what you were saying, it kind of sounds like with NFTs, like, it's not like a social media platform where you kind of like get hashtags and like you build your audience there. It's more like you have an audience on social media and then you direct them to the NFT. It's like a website.
Yeah, totally. So they're sort of like on, in Web 2, if you have, Saatchi Art and Etsy and Amazon Marketplace, however your own website, however you're distributing your art, the same as in Web 3. So there are different platforms or marketplaces that somebody can essentially mint and distribute their work. So you have Super Rare as an exclusive, invite-only platform. You have OpenSea, which is open source for anybody to mint work, starting today. There are different ways and different pros and cons to each one of those marketplaces that are available. I'm on several different ones, trying to figure out my value on each one, trying to, meet with different collectors on each one. So there's not like one size fits all, but similarly to Web 2, where you have different avenues for distribution, or even social media, Web 3 reflects that as well.
That's actually an interesting question, if you don't mind answering, how you are pricing your NFTs. Like, is it the time and the, that takes to create a piece, or what do you, how do you, if you don't mind sharing that part of
Yeah, that's a great question. I have found that, my early work was really, really minimalistic. It was just like figurative bodies, just line work. There was no color, nothing. And it was then that I was sort of working through the idea or the pressure to price my work based on the amount of time that it took me to create a piece, because sometimes it didn't take me that long. It didn't take me 100 hours to create a piece. Sometimes it took an hour. You know what I mean? But as an artist, if I have been drawing since the age of 5 years old, and drawing with like fervor and passion and commitment to like actually developing my style and skill set, I am taking into account and consideration the 2 decades of work that I have done up until the point at which I'm creating that piece. I even with line work, it was like I would have, haters online that were like, my kid can draw a stick figure. And I was
There's
like,
always
well,
those people.
right. And I was like, that's amazing. Have them go sell it. Like have them get their bag. You know what I mean? And so I think for me, I am pricing based on my perceived value in terms of I've been drawing since 5, over 2 decades. I am committing hours and hours and hours a week to my skill level development. You know, I'm always taking courses. And 2, I am making some work really accessible just to sort of test out the market cap of my work, and some work inaccessible to a lot of people. So I have work that is right now priced for editions at 0.25 ETH, which would be, gosh, I think maybe $750 today. And then I have other work priced at 10 Ethereum, which would be like 30 grand. I have yet to sell that piece. The most I've ever sold for is 3 ETH, which at the time was 10 grand. But I mean, I just wept for an hour. I was in disbelief.
Congratulations. That's exciting.
Thank you. And but the thing is like that piece, I decided to list that at that because it was titled Corporate America. It was essentially a story around this piece will be put toward my escaping corporate America. So I think for my work, I price it based on the story, based on the narrative, based on, I think, my even personal ties to that piece. There's some work that I'm like, you know what, this is a great piece, but I'd be willing to let it go for $100, and that's fine. I'm not going to think of it. There's other work, even if it's not as technically good or as compositionally compelling or whatever, that I price for so much higher because I'm not willing to let that go for any less than what I've priced it for. And it's taken me a long time to kind of figure out what that looks like. I have listed things for far too low and far too less, but it's just a process of trial and error, and even understanding like my trajectory and understanding my long-term value. Like if I see myself as actually making it, you know, whatever that means, then I'm gonna make some stuff kind of inaccessible to the greater audience, because I believe that there will be a collector that comes along and says, oh, that piece is worth 10 ETH. Here you go, baby girl, that's yours.
Yeah, that's actually really good to hear for the audience listening, because we kind of do the similar thing where with my landscapes that I do, those are the pieces where I'm like, I don't mind, you know, I can do one a day, like I can sell those, you know. And but some abstract paintings it took me a lot more energy and time, like thinking and sketching, all that stuff. So I price them a lot more. So but I give like options. So people that are listening, that's something would be interesting and good to take in, because you're doing that, you know, I'm doing that. And I heard a lot of other artists doing that, where they give different price range. And it's almost like you could have a print, and then you can have a little bit less of affordable art, and then just kind of have the different scale, because I know some artists stick to like in the 10,000-20,000s, and it's like, okay, I can't even their prints are expensive, and you're like, I can't even afford that, you know. Yeah, so that's interesting that you say that you have options there for people. Man, I lost my thought.
I think it's also, while you think about it, I think it's also really good to, that you're so open about it, because I think people get stuck, like, especially when you're like just getting started, you want someone to give you like a formula, like, okay, this is how you should price your art, you know. But I think art is so subjective that it's so hard to say, like, to one person a painting could be worth $10. Like you said, someone's like, oh, my 5-year-old could draw that. Okay, to that person, they obviously don't value your art. But to someone else who comes along and sees that same painting, they could be like, wow, this just like changed my life. Like, I will pay whatever for this piece, you know? So that's what we've also come to find, and like why we don't even feel bad like changing our prices like whenever, you know. It's kind of just like, I mean, not like whenever, but like as Felix grows in his career and stuff, like I think it's good to be testing pricing all the time.
Mhm.
Yeah, I do
And
too.
what you were saying in the beginning about like your experience, like since you were a kid, you were developing your style. It's interesting because today actually I was responding to comments on Facebook, and this person asked me, "Oh, how long did this piece take?" You know, and a lot of people oftentimes ask me that, and I always wonder why they ask that question. You know,
Yeah.
like and I answer like 2 days or 3 days or one day, you know, but I'm thinking, I'm trying to understand their mindset, why they want to know how long it took me, because like, okay, so if I had the experience of practicing with this landscape or this style, particular style, and now I used to do it in like a landscape in the beginning took me like a month to paint, you know, like get all the colors, and it was difficult, but now I can do it in a day or something because of the experience, because of time. So like I feel like the time, I feel like it does matter, your experience, you know, your,
Yes.
then, you know, like, and it's hard to then it's, you get kind of like hard to
Put a
price
number
it, you
on
know,
it,
because
yeah.
you're like, all right, I've
Right.
been doing this so long, and I'm like, all right, so how do I price this, because this took me a day,
Well,
but
one thing
like
I
you
want to add
forget
that I think
about.
you guys are kind of touching on is that you also, as an artist, all of us have had to take risks to support our art in the early stages. Like there are times when you have to go out on a limb when your friends are off working accounting jobs that their parents got them or whatever. Like you have to be the one to say, hey, I'm leaving behind the big money, or the potential to have security in my future, and I'm taking a gamble on myself, you know, that most people aren't willing to take.
Yeah.
And I think that that is, you know, that all
Worth a
factors
lot,
into
yeah.
it. Like you
Yeah.
went years without payment where other people were getting paid for their work, you know, potentially. And so it's
Yeah.
like you
I
might have been
think,
getting paid, you know, for your day job, but you weren't getting paid for your art. You were just investing in that, and that was time and energy while your friends were out having fun, you know. You had to take
yeah,
that chance.
doing who knows what. I think even
Mhm.
Felix, to your example, I think that's perfect because, you know, if years ago it took you a month to paint a landscape piece, but now it takes you a day, you're not going to price today's version at 1/30th of what that one was, you know,
Right.
there, because there is no formula. Like you are a much more credible, much more authoritative, much more experienced artist now. So even though it takes you a day, you can price it for more than that piece took you a few years ago at a month to have developed that. You know what I mean? Just because of that skill set and because of sort of the way in which you've established yourself career-wise now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's always an interesting talk all the time about pricing and art and all that, because everyone, like, it always changes, even for us, like Andrea said, that like we'll experiment and change what will work. And sometimes you get like a really good like sale and things go good, but then
Yeah.
and then you're at this stage where you're, you know, building again, growing again, and you're waiting, you know, that waiting period, you know. So I think every artist kind of has that, faces that, you know, like you make
Oh,
that
yeah.
one big huge sale, like you're like
your 10,000
yeah, and then
Yes.
you wait,
Yeah.
you're waiting for another one of those, you know.
Right.
But yeah, anyway,
I think, I mean, I think that's important to note too, is that growth, especially as an artist, is not linear, because there is no formula to creativity. I mean, and that's sort of like, unfortunately, I always wish that there were a formula to the pricing or the marketing or the selling or whatever it is, you know. But if there is anything that is formless when it comes to the way that something should be done, it's art. You know what I mean? And we see that time and time again. It was always like the artists that really believed in themselves but didn't necessarily care about their price points or whatever, were the ones that kind of popped off, because it was like, I'm just here for the art. So I think even with all of this conversation around like how to you know, and even within my resources, I provide pricing strategies and stuff for NFTs, because I do understand, you know, when you're starting, you're like, oh gosh, I need a couple bullet points of something just to keep me grounded, somewhere to start. But even, I mean, so much bigger and so much more important than that is just your personal, I want to say, like, commitment to your own vision. And I've heard from a lot of people, like, if I'm pricing something, or if Sean is pricing something, you know, we'll sit there and think, okay, you know, go back and forth as to how to actually list something. And I've heard on Twitter a bunch of times, like, well, something is only as valuable as whatever a collector is willing to pay for it. And to an extent that's true, but also not at all, because art is so much more valuable than just its monetary label. You know what I mean? So there are some pieces that I have not sold because there hasn't been somebody that's come along to say, oh, like, you value this piece at 10 ETH and so do I, therefore I can collect it, it's now mine. But I genuinely, I would not sell it for $1 less than that. So for me, that is its value. You know what I mean? And that might mean that I don't sell it for 10 years, and that's fine, because I don't plan on selling it for anything less than that.
Right. And it's like, if that makes anyone mad, it's like, why are you mad? It's the artist's choice. Like, you weren't, you know, gonna buy it anyway.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. And yeah, exactly. I mean, it really is like, we say in NFTs a lot, a rising tide lifts all boats. If there is another artist that is popping all the way off, all I want to do is sit here and celebrate them, because that doesn't mean they're taking away from my sales. That just means more eyes are coming into NFTs, more eyes are understanding the value of digital art in this, like, you know, digital renaissance. And I think that that's important for all of us, artists in NFTs, traditional artists, artists in school, wherever you are, to really celebrate the fact that there are artists that are valuing themselves in like kind of ridiculous but beautiful ways, because art is so important. I feel like there's so much more that I want to say about that, but it, you know, that's kind of a weighty conversation.
I do have one more question about like doubts that people give, and I'm curious what your opinion is. Like, I've heard people say that, oh, you know, like the government is eventually gonna like not allow cryptocurrency to, like, they're gonna have to like work with their own cryptocurrency or something like that, or they're gonna like put I forget the word, they're gonna like prevent crypto from being used aside from theirs or whatever eventually. What do you think about that? Do you think that there is going to be a time that would happen, or like, how do you think crypto will work like long term, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. In my personal opinion, I think we're past the point of the government just deciding that crypto won't work anymore, because it's already pretty ingrained in what it is that we're doing as a society. I know it's kind of right now this weird little niche thing, and you still have to be maybe, you know, kind of a perceived nerd or whatever to be interested in NFTs or crypto, because it's pretty nerdy. But like Miami right now is advocating for the use of Bitcoin. They want to become like the Bitcoin capital or the crypto capital of the states. And right now, I just applied for a Coinbase card. Coinbase is a cryptocurrency exchange in which I can purchase Ethereum and Bitcoin and, you know, all these different kinds of like altcoins or whatever. But I could use my Coinbase card to purchase things with crypto. So with Ethereum in my wallet or Bitcoin in my wallet, I can buy things with Bitcoin or with Ethereum. If Tesla allows for users to purchase a Tesla with Ethereum because Elon Musk really believes in decentralization and Ethereum. I mean, I think that right now we have enough power players in the space, and there's enough utility and enough, I think, backing for cryptocurrencies. I believe we're at the point in which you can't necessarily strip that from the people anymore, especially because it's decentralized, which means that it's not up to the government to decide how cryptocurrency works. It's up to the people. That is decentralization, is the transfer of authority from the single or the one to the masses. And that's what makes it important.
So I guess we talked about a lot about NFTs and stuff, but can we talk about your art as well, and kind of like how, like you said, you were doing more like basic line drawings. What is like inspiring you now, and like how has your art changed?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm at such, I think, a sacred point in my creative process. I'm really separating and disconnecting, I think, from consuming a lot right now. So I've been predominantly offline. Sean and I had a no screen Sunday last weekend. So we, no iPads, no phones, no TVs, no nothing. We kind of sat in
That's why it
silence.
was hard to catch you.
Yeah, no, literally. And so Felix, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm so sorry it took me so long to get back, but
That's
I
all right.
really am like trying to disconnect, because I think
That's
that,
healthy.
yeah, and I think that so much of my artistry, especially in my earlier days, was based on the art that I loved. And so I wanted to recreate the work that I felt like really pulled me, and I wanted to do that for other people. And now I'm at the point in my creativity or my career in which I only want to lean more and more into my story and more into an uber recognizable, uber specific style. And so I'm calling my style super stacked, one word, super stacked, because I essentially at this point, like, I'm still, I care about lines. I don't really care to render anything. I don't necessarily care about color so much, but I love lines and I love line work. And so a lot of my work today is explorative and experimental when it comes to how I stack layers, whether that's in a narrative sense or in a stylistic sense. So sometimes I'll use like stippling, or sometimes I'll use colored pencils, or sometimes I'll use like a digital, character or something, all kind of stacked on top of each other to tell often juxtaposed stories, specifically around womanhood, around my experiences, kind of navigating femininity, especially when it comes to crypto. I think that's something that's really been impressed upon me, is the necessity to show up as a woman artist, because that's, firstly, challenging in the traditional space. It is so bro-y. And
so we just moved to Puerto Rico, and like a lot of guys like move here, and so like we'll be walking down the street sometimes and we're like, that's a Bitcoin bro.
Yeah, we always have like this game going on,
Like, I bet that's a Bitcoin bro.
And I bet there are so many. I feel like I know a lot of people in this space that are in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And Costa
Was that
Rica too,
earpod?
for some reason. Sorry.
Yeah, they always have the earpods in.
The
Yes.
earpod.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
Yeah, it's very techy, it's very tech bro. And so I feel like my art has almost, I found it really expressive from like an uber feminine, like I want to maintain sort of this feminine energy in my work, but play on the juxtaposition of femininity and masculinity, because I don't necessarily find myself that I fit into either one of those like particular pillars, just in terms of like presentation and things. I like oversized clothes, I like big baggy jeans and sneakers and things like that. And I hate flower dresses, and like I can't, wear pink, you know what I mean? So I think that, but my work is like really feminine. And so I feel like I am wanting to tell a story that is very personal to me, that hopefully inspires somebody that's navigating their womanhood or their femininity in a way that is abstract, or their masculinity, or somewhere kind of in the middle, because I think that's important to my artistry. And some of my work is really, really, I want to say ugly. Sean will call it unpalatable, because it's kind of like hideous compositions or like really grotesque color palettes or something, but I love that type of work. And some of it's kind of lovely and tender and more maybe feminine from an expectational standpoint, whatever that means. So I'm finding, I think my favorite work right now is coming from a place of like being a walking juxtaposition as a person and an artist and a creator.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And I think
Really
that what
cool.
makes you a real artist is that you, despite the fact that it's now your living and there's money on the line and, putting food on the table on the line, is that you still choose to lead with the story versus leading with the money. And I think ultimately I'm kind of a harsh critic of people who try to invade art spaces with, or try to masquerade as an artist when it's really just a business. And I don't think like when you would say like, oh, who are you to judge that? But I think it's a really quite easy thing to judge. And it's the people who lead with the money. If this is all a money making scheme, then then you're a business person, and that's okay. But it's like, don't masquerade as an artist. But if you're an artist, and even if you're raking in the cash, if you choose over and over again to lead with the story and do things that maybe aren't formulaic or profitable or
Mhm.
anything, and you choose because it's your story, then I think that's what makes you an artist, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think, and I honestly, I feel like that's where art catches. And so, I mean, for a listener who's sort of just maybe wondering, because I've spent so much time here, is like, how much do I lean into what the market wants out of me versus what I want to make? And
Right.
I'm so proud of, I think, the integrity that I've maintained as an artist, especially in NFTs. I know that might be like maybe an oxymoron to some people that aren't fans of NFTs, but I think when it comes to my style and my creativity, I have always, even against like the greater perception, or maybe my greater intellect, is like I've always leaned into a commitment to authenticity and a commitment to the storytelling. And I do think that that's the art that catches. I
Yeah.
am daily discouraged by the things that I see in the space. And it's really frustrating as an artist to see, I think, profile projects and, um, specific collections really come up and capitalize on the market in a way that doesn't necessarily put artists on, or doesn't necessarily advocate for, authentic creativity. And it is a fight, in the same way that it's a fight in the traditional space to sort of stand out in a saturated market. We see the same thing in NFTs, but in NFTs,
Yeah.
on top of just art, you're also, kind of up against like the big players and the big names and celebrities that are coming in. And a lot of those projects are cash grabs. And so
I know.
I
I was just
definitely,
gonna say, I feel like literally every celebrity is just like, oh, hey, I have an
Right.
NFT.
But I think that here's the
yes.
thing is that I think that I don't want to spotlight you as an NFT artist and like put that burden on you, because I think, like you said, it existed in the traditional space as well. Like, I'm not calling it good or bad. I'm just saying it's the way of the universe. It's always has been that way. Is there's always going to be people trying to profit where there's art like people who aren't as invested in the art as the artists trying to
Yeah.
scrape their profit off of that. And that's just going to exist. But I commend you. And I think that, I see this in Felix as well, is just people who can lean into their intuition and lead with their story. Because I think that the irony of that is that, like you said, the most successful artists tend to be those people who have taken that risk and said, hey, I'm going to go on my intuition, not try to create some formula,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I noticed that in your work too, which I've been enjoying personally watching
Mm.
your work, because I could see growth, I could see
Yes, he
your
does,
experiment.
because he would like just show me.
I would be
He's
like,
like, babe, look at Sophie.
yeah, I'm like, look at
Oh,
this one. This is cool.
oh,
Like
my heart.
I love color, and I love
Mhm.
I love it, just like I could tell like when a person is trying to be creative and put their, creative, like, and when it's interesting, because when you are actually creating art, your heart's like fully in it. You're not thinking about money, like we were
Mm.
talking earlier. You're not thinking
Mhm.
about anything. You're free. You're like flowing and creating purely,
Mm.
relaxing
Mhm.
art. And I see that in art. And when I see people expand and experiment and try something new and add something, I could see like it's fun to follow, like
The
those,
growth and the
the growth,
journey. Yeah.
to see you start from just a few lines, I remember, and then now you're adding more and more, and I'm like, whoa, you're growing
Mm.
pretty fast. You're expanding and you're growing, and you're not limiting yourself. And I love to see that. I'm all about that, and like that's the kind of artists I love to follow, is when
Mm.
artists challenge themselves, like
Mm.
not being afraid to um be judged, or like if something that's been working really good and it's been working good, but you're like, I want to challenge myself and push.
Yeah.
Not, I know I can create something that is like going to be good, but like I'm going to do something that isn't popular or something,
Yeah.
like because I'm curious, and you just
Yeah.
do it. And
Or
I think,
not palatable, like your
yeah,
boyfriend says.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to agree with him, and I laugh and I love it, because that's the art that I want to make. I sometimes I want to make something that's, beautiful or lovely, like I said, and other times I just need to get some
mhm,
junk out. And
Right.
I'll say too, like, even in the process of that growth, I appreciate that so much. Thank you, because it has been like a very active and a very proactive commitment to my growth. I know that I don't want to stay the same every time I approach the canvas. I try and challenge myself, whether that's, paper or digital. And I will say too, like, as an artist, the last year or two have by far been the most uncomfortable I have ever been.
mhm,
I mean, at points, and I'll say this because I want, your listeners to know, like, I mean, there were days in which I just wanted to crawl out of my skin. I was so uncomfortable with the work that I was making because it was so almost off-putting or like extremely vulnerable or just raw. And I didn't necessarily know if I wanted collectors or the internet, anybody that I was sharing this with, to be aware that I was suffering in that way, or to be aware that I wanted to lean into something that was a little bit more unpalatable. I have turned away some of my earlier clients because they wanted like the really beautiful bodies, and they wanted the tender, sweet work that I don't necessarily make anymore. But if I had committed to that, I would be so bored. I wouldn't be an artist because I'd be bored. I'd be back in marketing. But I mean, some days were harder than others, but I've absolutely fought through those days where I was just like, oh, I can't even sit in my skin. This is so uncomfortable, but here we go. Another one, you know?
That's encouraging, you know, like that's why we're excited to have this podcast and having all these artists, because to share that, you know, for people to hear that, you know, the experience, that actual, what it is to live as day to day, you know, simple, how it's like really as an artist. It's not always like, oh, you're a full-time artist, everything's great, you know?
You've made it. It's the dream.
Yeah. And I think it's brave of you to share that, because it is so true. It's like, even if you haven't made it as an artist yet, maybe it's actually a comforting thought by realizing that, hey, this person isn't just living this golden life, you know, every minute of their life. Like, they have the same struggles you're having now. So you might as well enjoy where you're at right now in the process, because it's not going to go away. The bad stuff isn't going to go away. Which sounds like a nasty thought, but it's actually a great thought. It's like, hey, we're all in it, you know?
Right,
like
exactly.
And that you think is or has, you know, whatever. It's not, they're still a human being. They still have their struggles and.
Oh yeah. And it's, none of it is easy. I mean, I think it's funny because I tell people I'm an artist and I work from home, and they're like, oh, what a sweet life. And it is, oh my gosh, I am thankful beyond belief, but it also is suffering. I mean, to be an artist is really difficult. I am daily. I mean, Sean and I are giving each other pep talks all the time. Like, I know you're struggling today, but let's pick it up. Let's go, or let's rest today. I think that's something important too that we've learned as artists, is to find a very sustainable rhythm, because otherwise you will absolutely burn out. I kind of felt that toward the end of last year, and after a year in NFTs, I mean, I was extremely depressed, extremely anxious, overstimulated in every way. And I had to take a step back, and I didn't mint anything until I think for the first 3 or 4 months of this year, because I needed to be offline. I needed to be off blockchain, and really kind of come back to making work out of a sense of like peace and sacredness and honesty, as opposed to struggle and overstimulation and anxiety. Even though I had some killer work that came out of that time period, I don't want to stay there for my personal mental health, you know? Good for the art though.
Talking about like your journey, what was it like financially making that switch? Like, was it a struggle? Was it easy to just like, I mean, like, I'm sure there was that time where you were like making that transition and it was probably like uncomfortable, but how was it for you? Like, and how is it now? I guess like you were saying that you were able to take some time off. Like, was that from like the sales that you had made last year, or how is it for you?
Yeah, partly because of sales last year. Secondly, because of work that I was doing for companies, like Async Art, which is an NFT platform that enables creators to mint and distribute programmable or interactive work. So work that changes over day and night cycles or something like that. So a really beautiful platform, Async Art. And I was doing some freelance for, I was copywriting for some artists that were needing help in terms of like their messaging and positioning. So I was sort of leaning on all of my different skill sets to say, okay, I'm killer at social media for companies, I'm killer at content creation, I'm killer at copywriting, right? Like at the time. And even now I'm doing work for Async, and I'm doing work for, you know, I have like side projects and things just to help facilitate my sustainability, at least until, you know, I'm like full-time artistry forever and ever. But for me, I definitely, I mean, last year especially was a hustle. I think at one point I had like 4 or 5 clients, and I just, you know, for copywriting and marketing and stuff at the same, on top of being an artist. And I definitely, I mean, I reached that point of almost chronic fatigue in which I like couldn't even call the doctor to make an appointment. I was too tired of everything, and it just felt so tedious. But my journey has definitely been an ebb and flow. It's been kind of like a very, very slow and methodical transition out. Sean kind of had a moment where he was like, I can't do this work thing anymore, I quit. And he did it, but he's so much more, I mean, just such a beautiful brain, such a beautiful mind, a very different type of person than I am. I'm much more calculated and intentional. But for me, it's been like, okay, have, 5 clients all at the same time and a job and be an artist at the same time, just to build up a little bit of stability, a little cushion. And then from there, kind of like letting some of those clients, letting some of those jobs go, just to say, I need to devote more of my time to art so that I can be the artist that I want, so that I can ask for the prices that I want to set these for.
That's good. Yeah, it's good to know that, because I feel like it's been like that with like Felix's transition too. So it's good to hear that it's not just like I mean, everyone always dreams of like, oh, I'm quitting my job being a full-time artist, but it's not necessarily that like sharp of a cut. It's like kind of like you ease into it. And I also I also like what you said about like how you're looking at like the big picture. And I think that's really important as well. It's like, don't sacrifice yourself today for like for a paycheck or whatever, so that you can be the artist you want to be long term, which I think is really smart.
Right. And I really do advocate for like the longevity and the sustainability for an artist career. If you have the ability to quit today and be full-time and that's what you want to do, like, yes, please go do it. But it also, to be an artist doesn't mean that you have to be 9 to 5, 24/7 an artist today. Be an artist, regardless of what your life looks like at that time. I have always been an artist, regardless of what I was doing in that season of my life. And right now, thankfully, I have more time than ever to commit to art. But, it's taken me a long time to get here. And it wasn't like one day I was able to do that. I will be working probably for another few years, firstly, because I want to, and because like I'm really invested in, the development and acceleration of this company, but also because like I want some stability and I want something to come back to when there are days that I am scared. So it's not that easy. And I wish I could just like pull the plug on everything and say, nobody ever text me or talk to me again, I'm an artist. But that's not a reality, not for me.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, we went well over time, which is a great testament to.
I could literally keep asking questions. So
a very fascinating
There's
interview.
a lot to talk about for sure.
So I was just wondering, do you guys, I think we're going to skip Ask an Artist today just because we're so over time, but like, if you guys just have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with anyone listening about art or life or anything.
Yeah.
You want to go, Sophie?
Sure. Yeah. I'll say, for those, listening that are skeptical about NFTs, stay skeptical. It's a very strange space. Do your research, look into it, see if it's for you. If it is, like, I am available online to DM if you have any questions, or if there is anything that I can do to help facilitate maybe that transition into NFTs. But for all artists in general, I would just say, stay true to yourself. Like, please stay committed to your story, and really, really lean into the ways in which your style and your skill set and your story are different from anybody else, because that is where you will find your catch. And there's no formula. I wish there was.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. That was really good. Yeah, I would agree with you as well. I think it's all about just, like working, being, coming to the studio again or wherever the space is, and just creating, being there. A lot of the times it's quiet. A lot of the times it's just, it's no one's, you're not like always getting this crazy inspiration. You just have to show up all the time. Even for artists that are full-time doing art, they have to still, push themselves to be, coming, going and creating something, sketching or something to do with releasing the creative the creative side of yourself, So yeah, I 100% agree with you. Thank you again, Sophie, for being here. We really enjoyed you having you on. By the way, where can people find you? Where are you most active, and where can people find you, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, everybody, you guys, thank you so much for having me on today. It was such a huge honor. I'm so glad that we got to do this today, and yeah, really awesome that I got to have this conversation with you guys. I'm walking away full of heart and mind. Yeah, so you guys can find me on Twitter. I am at Sophie, Sophie, said so, SAIDSO, and on Instagram at Sophie Sturdevant, my full name, Sophie Sturdevant, and sophiesturdevant.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Sophie. I think, you're the first one who was on this show talking about the NFTs and just kind of, and so this podcast, I think, is going to be valuable, and a lot of listeners are going to find some really good information here. So thank you again for sharing and being open with us today. And hopefully in the future, we'll have you back and see where you're at, and see how things are going with you and your art.
And you will have sold that 10 ETH painting.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. I receive it in advance.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much again, and a million times over. Thank you.
Thank you to the Color by Felix audience. Thanks, guys, so much for tuning in. We really hope this could be valuable for you. And if it was, be sure to leave a review on this podcast episode, wherever you're listening. We hope to see you guys next week. And thanks for being here.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye. See you online.
All right, Sophie, take care. We'll see you soon.
Take care.
Peace.
Bye.